Mhm. Well, welcome to all of you that are here at the moment. I'll give it another couple of minutes before we get started to give people a chance to join.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the conference today. I didn't mean to do that. Just so you know, you are in as an attendee for this webinar, meaning you won't be able to share your video or audio. So please feel free to use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions that may come up during the presentations. And feel free to also use the chat feature as well to share any comments you may have. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Mackenzie. Mackenzie has been helping us put all this stuff together, and we couldn't have done it without her. My name's Carl Prey. I'm the principal investigator of this project, and I'm just going to give a couple of introductions to our two initial speakers, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a sort of an introduction to our project and the conference itself. So our first speaker, and we're very pleased to have her with us, is Amy Davies from USAID. She's the director of the of the policy analysis and engagement section of Feed the Future at USAID. And then our second intro will be from Vara Prasad, who's a distinguished professor, a university distinguished professor at Kansas State, and also the head of the Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab. And we really thank both of you for joining us, and hope you can, join for quite a while. Amy, go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. And I do want to start by thanking Rutgers University, Kansas State University, and their partners for organizing this final conference of the Feed the Future Policy Research Consortium project, and inviting me to say a few words to welcome you all. I know I'm speaking to a group of like-minded people when it comes to the importance of strengthening policy systems as a critical component of our development work. Inclusive policy processes, evidence-based decision-making, and accountable policy implementation are key aspects of sustaining and building on our impact in all sectors, including agricultural transformation. The opportunity we have now, here today, to pause and reflect on lessons learned and priorities moving forward could not come at a better time. With the recent Food Systems Summit, COP26, that's occurring as we speak, and the upcoming Nutrition for Growth Summit in December, we're all focused on how we build on our efforts to reduce hunger and malnutrition and better support agri-food systems, particularly in light of global challenges like COVID-19, climate change, and increasing conflict. As many of you know, USAID and our interagency partners have recently revised the global food security strategy that underpins Feed the Future. This new strategy responds to today's challenges and doubles down on our focus to reduce poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. Through the strategy, we're increasing our focus on strengthening food systems, advancing equity and inclusion, and addressing climate change through agricultural transformation, among other priorities. The need for strong policy systems remains a central and cross-cutting element of that strategy. The types of policy research and analysis undertaken through the Feed the Future Policy Research Consortium, as well as other organizations represented today, helps us analyze emerging problems and support appropriate policy responses. Your work related to COVID-19 helped countries better respond to the needs of their populations, make sound policy decisions, and ultimately keep borders open and supply chains functioning. Similarly, the project's work has helped innovate ways to better measure policy impact, reflect systems level change, and develop new indicators and tools such as HWISE and IWISE to assess water insecurity. I, like you, am looking forward to hearing more about the work of the Policy Research Consortium project over the next 2 days and better understanding how we can build on its lessons learned and successes. So Carl, I do hope that I can stay for a good part of the discussion and the presentations. Thank you again for the opportunity to welcome everyone to this event. Back to you.
Thank you much, Amy. Thanks. Vara?
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you, Amy, for your time as well. Greetings and welcome to this virtual conference being organized by the Feed the Future Policy Research Consortium. As Carl said, this consortium is led by Rutgers University and is an associate award from the Feed the Future Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab here at Kansas State University. I wish we were meeting in person, but considering the conditions, I'm glad that you are able to do this using an online platform. Each morning, today and tomorrow, you'll learn in detail about the key results, outputs, and learnings directly from our outstanding researchers and scholars from different institutions who are part of this consortium. I wanted to say special thanks and welcome to all the partner organizations from our host countries and from our US institutions, leaders, representatives from USAID, policymakers, scholars, and students from across the world who are joining us today on this virtual conference. You are all key partners in this journey, and this consortium would not have met its objectives and goals without your full commitment and support. So thank you. I cannot believe that this is already time to close out this consortium next month in December. The memory of its launch in Washington, DC and our first meeting in Atlanta is still fresh in my mind. Then came the COVID-19 and disrupted our lifestyle, travel, and not being able to meet in person since then. Since early 2000, we were all living in an unprecedented conditions with the ongoing human pandemic COVID-19. It just not disrupted our lifestyle, it killed over 5 million people around the world and over 750,000 people in US alone. Despite these difficult circumstances, all of you were resilient and safely continued your research, education, and outreach activities using innovative methods and approaches. I know it was not easy. We appreciate your hard work and commitment. As Amy said, this year 2021 was also a significant year in terms of 2 major international conferences, which brought our global leaders together to address key challenges of food and nutritional security, climate action, and urgency to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. These 2 events were the United Nations Food Security Summit, UNFSS, which happened in September, and the currently ongoing United Nations Climate Change Conference, the COP26. Over the last few months, I've been listening to many of these dialogues which were happening before these big events, and USAID was part of these discussions. All of them were calling for a transformational change in our agri-food systems. They emphasized the need for more targeted investments in innovations to meet the quadruple goals of food security, nutrition security, climate security, and energy security. Although there were several items being proposed and discussed, for me, 3 things which were common in many of these deliberations were the following. The first, the need for innovation in policies in terms of approaches, implementation, impact, and beyond. Second, the need for appropriate indicators and metrics to measure impacts, outputs, and outcome. And the third was the need for transparency in terms of availability of disaggregated data with regard to investments and metrics and indicators that are being used to measure progress towards their targets. In addition, one additional question was being asked in most of these discussions: how our agri-food systems can be more proactive rather than reactive to incidences like COVID-19, the climate shocks, the shocks from pests and diseases to our crops and livestock. This was a big learning from what happened with COVID-19 and how we reacted. This policy research consortium has been working on many of these items. Some of you are actually involved directly in these dialogues of UNFSS and COP26. In addition, during COVID-19, the team led by Dr. Lori Post from Northwestern developed a new platform to monitor the spread and surveillance of COVID-19 and provided bi-weekly updates to USAID and many stakeholders. These were extremely valuable and appreciated by everyone. You will hear more about other accomplishments from most of our researchers at this conference. I would like to end by sharing my personal experience in while working on an International Commission on Sustainable Agricultural Intensification, COSI, over the last 18 months. This commission brought together scholars, policymakers, practitioners from many organizations around the world to address the key questions which specifically focused on innovations in sustainable agri-food systems. Some of these questions were: how much funding is currently being invested in research and development in agriculture? And how much of that is targeted towards environmental outcomes? And what is the investment gap to address some of the key SDGs and climate goals? And what are some of the common processes and outcome principles that must be used in our agri-food systems? And many of the items such as equity and also taking care of gender and youth as well. Some reports are already published and some will be finalized very soon. These reports are also highlighting, in addition to technical innovations that are generally focused on biophysical innovations, we especially need to focus on addressing the gap that exists in socioeconomic innovations. For example, especially with regards to policies for creating enabling conditions, innovations in financial instruments, identifying pathways and approaches on scaling. These results and learning, the results from learning from the policy consortium will be extremely useful to guide us as we move forward to implement some of these recommendations from UNFSS, COP26, and also our commission. In addition, as Amy mentioned, your learnings will also be very useful as USAID develops and implements its new research strategy for the upcoming 3 to 5 years. I look forward to learning the outcomes that will come out of your deliberations at this conference. I'll be in and out, but I'll do my best to listen when I can. Enjoy the conference, best wishes, and stay safe. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Vara and Amy, for this very nice introduction. What we plan to do with the rest of this half hour, maybe a little bit more, is sort of to introduce some of the achievements and also the conference as it's going to go forward. We just found out that that Jim Emke won't be able to join us for his presentation at 9 o'clock, I guess. And much of his presentation on ag transformation is also a nice introduction to the conference. So what I'm going to try to do in 15 or 20 minutes, maybe take a little bit more time, is to combine what I had already set up to present, and then also take some of the slides, at least from Jim's presentation, and put them together to start out our conference. We'll see how fast I can talk, or how comprehensive I can be, or something. So okay, so what I want to do then is to tell you about the consortium and tell you about what some of our achievements have been, and then give some examples of what's going to come forward. And I'm going to cut the examples a little bit so that we can put together Jim's presentation into this. So let's go to a quick introduction. The goals of the consortium have been to basically elaborate on this notion of agricultural transformation, moving it beyond productivity, agricultural productivity, sectoral shares, labor allocation, in order to develop a broader framework for USAID's agri-food policy work. We are have developed measures to broaden ways to measure the broadened transformation, measures which include information on the food value chain, water, nutrition, resilience, and then put these together into aggregate indices of transformation. We also have a series of case studies on the impact of policy change, economic and social impacts. And finally, we responded to a number of specific asks for policy studies from Washington and the missions. This project started really just at the end of 2014-15, and focused on this research on the impact of policy and transformation. And it was administered by the Foreign Agriculture Service of USDA. And then in 2018 to the present, we shifted our focus. It was still on research on policy, but a lot more emphasis on bringing the results to the missions and to Aid Washington. And it was administered under Vara at the Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab. And another sort of milestone in the project was the COVID epidemic, which really changed our research focus to food policy responses to the pandemic. And it also, of course, changed the way we worked. We are no longer wandering off to Africa and South Asia or down to Washington. So this is the cast of characters in our consortium, and the names of our collaborating universities. And in addition to this team, which you'll see most of in our presentations, we depended very much on collaborations with other teams of policy researchers and other groups that were supporting research. So individual scholars, for example, Regina, who's going to be speaking later today, David Zoberman, networks in Africa, scholars and students in Nigerian, Rwandan, Senegalese universities, and working with industry associations and government policymakers. And a lot of our work was also done in collaboration with other projects that were funded by the Gates Foundation, World Bank, FAO, National Institutes of Health. So we're showing you one bit of this, and but we depend highly on the expanded team and expanded contacts and knowledge. The communication of our results also went out through collaborative research with potential users, publications, conferences, usual academic things, and also a series of special seminars. USAID's pathways to impact of policy research seem like a good framework for the rest of what I wanted to say. And so I am going to talk about the achievements of the project in terms first of research outputs, then research users and what they, how we communicated with them. And then we'll talk, not now, but in later examples of how some of these projects changed research outcomes, and eventually, hopefully, we'll be reaching development outcomes also. Research outputs are a lot of the usual things, more than 50 peer-reviewed journal articles, often with African co-authors, and they're in the top journals of agricultural development economics, and science journals, Nature Food, Science Advances, medical journals, Journal of Medical Internet Research, and BMJ Global Health. And then we did 2 special issues of journals, which are just our work. Conferences organized, we did 3 of them. This is our 3rd one. We did an initial one at Rutgers. We did this, what we call it a listening session in Washington, and then today's meeting. And finally, we've done sort of innumerable sort of panels, conference presentations to academics, donors, policymakers, World Bank, Ag Economics, the Bio Consortium, et cetera. And so now the next component of this is research users. How did we get our message over to research users? Well, much of it, of course, went directly to the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, where we worked closely with Jim Hemke, Binia Mayob, and other colleagues of theirs. We did training projects for missions personnel, and input policy, and special webinars for Bureau of Food Security staff. We worked through BIFAD, presentations with them, and then we did some of these special studies that I already mentioned on R&D priorities, and how early generation seed policies could impact development and the COVID-19 response. The example of some of these impacts on aid were our close collaboration with Billy Hall and Jim Emke in March through June of 2020 to develop documents to provide USAID Washington and missions guidance on food policy options to respond to COVID-19. So both what we call the technical considerations for informing partner country COVID policies. And also we built up a large matrix to give people options to respond to the pandemic. In addition, as already mentioned by Vara, the Northwestern started up this global SARS-CoV-2 surveillance system, and Lori will talk about that extensively later today. In addition, there were global research users. So we provided chapters and background papers for FAO, for World Bank, for the UN Food System Summit, which we're going to talk a bit about later. We provided input to African organizations. AGRA is an example through our papers that were chapters, and Tom Reardon was the editor of this Hidden Middle annual report by AGRA. And so we influenced users through that system. And finally, we did capacity building, graduate students, trainees, some PhD and master students at MSU, Tufts, the University of Florida and Rutgers, and then support for student theses through the African Economic Research Consortium, grad students in Nigeria, Rwanda, who worked with our projects, and short-term training and conferences. Now, the last 2 parts of the aid policy impact section are on the research outcomes. Did policies get changed, and did the implementation of policies improve? Development outcomes, did we eventually reach farm income increases, small and medium enterprise profits, et cetera? These are things that at this stage of the game are best dealt with through some of the case studies that are going to be held in the rest of the conference. I've just put a few slides here as examples, people that have the nice pictures, Tom and Sweda in their policy work in Nigeria, the work by Tufts and at Tufts in impact on nutrition indicators, Sarah Young at Northwestern and H-Wise, it's already been mentioned. And then our own Jock Anderson, some of the work that he's doing on policy adaptations. All four of these will have presentations coming up in today or tomorrow. So the conference itself, the goals really are to present the results of our research, some of the lessons learned and implications for AIDS policy work, opportunities for aid and colleagues in academia and elsewhere to question and challenge some of our ideas and results. And then I capture these ideas eventually in our papers and final report. And finally, to identify activities that could be expanded future. We're very pleased to have a special session on the UN Food System Summit at 11:30 today. And with that, I was going to close and hand over things to the next session. But I think, and I hope Regina is okay with this, she's moderating our next session, that I will take about 10 minutes to present what would have been presented in that session by Jim Emke right now. So let me stop sharing this one and quickly rush into Jim's presentation. And for those of you that didn't hear earlier, oh, sorry, I didn't. Let's see. As I mentioned to people before we got